So, Tina, Donald Trump ran a populist campaign. Based on his first 68 days in office, would you say he's governing as a populist?
Well, I mean, first of all, nerd that I am, and someone who's written a lot about populism, I think the term is being thrown around quite a bit. I mean, if we say he ran as an anti-elitist, then yes, he's continuing with that. I think that what's different about him, perhaps than other even Republican populists, is that he's really not trying so hard to appeal across the base of the whole party. It's to his core supporters. It's to Trump supporters. So that's what we see so far. Not much has surprised me about the policies that he's chosen. We talked about the factors that would, lead to early action from the president. We saw the executive order on climate change. But some of the surprises, like the failure in the House last week, do underscore, I think, that he's not a traditional Republican.
He's not a traditional Republican, but he also hasn't been able to get anything done legislatively. And the people that he has surrounding him don't necessarily have any ideological coherence. You have people like Gary Cohn on one end and also Peter Navarro. What does this say about the general prospects of him to be able to move significant legislation and change the nature of U.S. policy?
Well, of course, as we know, U.S. presidency, the office of the presidency, the executive branch, is relatively weak. So it's Congress that makes legislation. I think that President Trump, with his executive style, has been probably a bit taken aback at how, unlike a CEO who can line up his deputies and say, this is, make it happen, it doesn't work that way. Members of Congress are always keen to show their independence, even when they're from the same party. And this is where markets often misread it, right? Of course, prospects for major reforms like tax reform are probably better now in principle than they've been for some time. But the fractions within the party, the fact that we, of course, have elections again in 2018, midterms, mean that it's just not that simple.
All right, so we have what's going on in the United States, and of course there are the upcoming elections in France and Germany as well. Beyond all of that, what would you say are the next hotspots for populism around the globe?
Well, if we're going to answer that question, we've got to sort of define a little bit what we think populism means. I don't think it's a particularly right-wing phenomenon, although it's often described that way. We're kind of at a time in electoral democracies where the terms left and right themselves don't mean very much. Authoritarian populism is something that's been studied by YouGov and the University of Essex, and those features include lack of support for human rights, for gender rights, demand for strong leadership, and more economic intervention, so protectionism. So I think what we mean in markets when we think about populism, we mean political outcomes that might lead to more economic intervention and disruption at the primary level. What I look at, and when we went down our road of looking at what we called Vox Populi risk, is other factors. I'm particularly interested in what I call the soft drivers of this phenomenon, and those things include really a lot to do with unease about globalization, so the pace of change, particularly technological change, cultural identity, which manifests itself with unease about immigration, for example. So there's a lot more going on, in my view, than just the economics.